Okay, thank you for that. So, as I was saying, we'll start with the insights from the needs assessment, just to understand where we are at with movement building, what are our current challenges around that, what do we hope can change, and what are the some of the resources that we require for that to happen. Then we'll jump into just a basic understanding of what movement building is, what does it look like, and begin looking at one of the frameworks that we shall be utilizing for even in our on our perspective to understand movement building and effectively work around that. Then really dive into localization, because localization is a big theme for us. Localization is a big theme that we want to really explore further, to better define it, to better understand how does localization happen, what is the context around localization, what are the different aspects of it. But as we understand localization, then also let's figure out what are the barriers that are really limiting us from going as much grassrooted as possible. What is holding us back to understanding localization? And then moving to the aspect of advocacy and lobbying. How do we create a story, a movement? How do we create, a connection with the communities that we're serving? How do we ensure that even the story that we're telling is really as much as possible owned by the community itself and not owned from an organizational perspective? So how do we do advocacy and lobbying to ensure that localization continues to be a concept that we are all really rooted into? And then we end the day with an aspect of some of the strategies for engagement, just ensuring that even as we speak about what localization is, some of the barriers to it, then what are the strategies that we can begin to utilize to ensure that all our aspects, all our conversations, all our work is really community centered? Because again, as we're saying, is that if we don't center our conversations around the community, then we continue to miss the mark. We continue to, take one step forward and two steps backwards, and trying to ask ourselves, what's really going on? And then we'll jump into tomorrow, where we'll now look at how do we design around sustainable movements? What does a sustainable movement actually look like? And here we'll be really utilizing case studies to help us do that. Then number two, we'll talk about how we monitor and evaluate our impact. How do we develop a shared vision? Some of the strategies for sustaining movements. And then as we really think about movements, and we also have to think about what does the leadership actually look like. So how do we have conversations around leadership and resource mobilizing for movement building? And then we end the day with sort of creating an action plan development. What are the next steps post this workshop that can really help us move to the next level? And this action plan development will not just be created tomorrow and then we forget about it, but it will be the first steps that we'll utilize to then have further conversations over the next month on what are some of the needs that each individual organization really requires in order for this to happen. But before we begin, I think it would be rude to not just have a sense of understanding who is in the room, what's happening, what's going on, just get to know each other. And so at this point, I'd like to invite us for just a quick introduction. So let's get to know each other for a minute. And how we'll do this is you will say your name, the organization that you come from, the country you represent, one word that best describes you with the first letter of your name, and a word that you relate to with our topic of the day. And the reason for using words is so that we don't really dive into really explaining of who we are and what we do, because we'll have an opportunity to do that. And so this can be done in a minute, and I shall begin. And then as you say, or you've said or done your introduction, then you can pass it along to someone else. I believe we all have a clear view of who the different participants are, so you can pass it along. So for instance, I can begin and say, my name is Rashid David Mutaha. I come from, or my organization is Development Dynamics. My country is Kenya. A word that describes the first letter of your name is that I am, for Rashid, respectful Rashid. And then how I relate the topic of the day for movement building is really just about collaboration. My word for movement building is collaboration. I hope those instructions are good. And that being said, I would like to pass it on to the first person that I see on my screen, who is and the first person who joined. So Abiot, please take it away. And when you are done, also pass it along to someone else. Abiot, welcome.
Yes, thank you. My name is Abiot Berdilo. Just as came from the SIFA Ethiopia organization. My country is Ethiopia. My word that best describe you with is first letter of your name is the first letter of my name is A. I would like to that very nice word is because A, and also that they related to with our topic of the day's movement building is Really, this workshop is very nice workshop. And for the first time to join this kind of workshop, then I would like this a wonderful collaboration with our CIFA organization.
Thank you, Abiot. You can pass it along to someone else.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Willis.
Hi, I'm a Kenyan by birth, and the word that best describes me is the first letter. With using the first letter of my name is we. Wow, I'll say that. And the word that would relate to today's topic of the movement building is teamwork. Thank you.
Thank you, Willis. We can move on to Abdullahi Abdi. Abdullahi Abdi is not able to hear us. We can move on to Benjamin Musau. Benjamin? Okay, if not, let's have Delphine Nyanchama.
Morning, everyone. My name is Delphine Nyanchama from the Eastern Africa Child Rights Network. Country, I'm from Kenya. A word that best describes me, D for diligent. A word that I can relate with the topic of the day is teamwork or networking, because I believe there will be no movement if we don't work as a team. Thank you, and looking forward to great engagements.
Thank you very much, Delphine. I can pass it along to Denebo. Denebo, if you're speaking, we're unable to hear you. I see you've unmuted, but we're unable to hear you. As Denebo sorts that out, maybe we can move on to Elsie.
Hi everyone, I'm Elsie, a gender and youth specialist. I'm really excited to be with you here. I'm from Kenya. A word that describes my first letter of my name is energetic. That's the first word that comes to mind. And then the topic for the movement building aspect that I think relates to it is power.
I love
Thanks.
it. Power, that's a really good one. Thank you so much, Elsie. We can have Halima Hussein. If Halima is unmuting or as she unmutes, and you can also please type this in the chat if you have problems with the audio, we can move on to Irene Anyango.
Good morning. My name is Irene Anyango. The word that best describes me from the first letter of my name is industrious. I am Kenyan. I do advocacy for rights from the Nestle Foundation. What would best describe this meeting is linkages, because we move together with the links that we create. Thank you.
Love that. Power, teamwork, linkages, just aspects of collaboration coming up. Thank you, Irene. Let's move on to Jatali.
Thank you everyone for inviting me to this training. My name is Jatani Golisa from Ethiopia organization, SIFA Ethiopia. The word that described by my first letter of my name is justice. And also the word that I went to related to today's topic is community-centered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justice Detani. Ensuring that we're really moving from the communities is important. Thank you so much. We can move on to Lynn Chemtai.
Okay, good morning all. My name is Lynn Chemtai Chestit. I work with Womankind Kenya, and word that can describe me is luminous, which means light and brightness. And just relating to today's topic, for me, it's more of creating linkages and building synergies. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. We can have Mercy Mora next.
Hello, morning everyone. My name is Mercy Mora from Kenya. I represent Mercy Global Foundation, and a word that best describes me that starts with my letter is marvelous mercy. And the word that I can relate with today's topic is synergy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that introduction. We can move on to Mesele Ayano.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mesele Siyu Mayano. I'm working for Gaio Pastoral Development Initiative as Executive Director. The word I'm choosing for the day is networking. Over to you.
Thank you. Networking, communication, collaboration, teamwork, really some key themes that are coming up. Thank you so much for that. We can move on to Rahma Ahmed.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rahma Ahmed. I work with Womankind Kenya and from Kenya. A word that best describes me is R, meaning realistic. And a word that I can relate to with today's topic is localization. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Rahma. We can then have Salad Arero.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Salad Arero. I work for SIFA Kenya. We are in Northern Kenya, and the word that best describes me is S, which means social. I've been doing social work all my life. And then the word that relates to our topic today is sustainability. Starting something and being able to sustain it.
كنا يا قرآن يا وزير.
Super. Thank you for that. Then we can have Thomas Mugaka.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Thomas Mugaka. I work with Core Africa Kenya. The word that describes me is think or thinking, and the word that relates to the topic of the day is cooperation.
Cooperation, very important. I love that. Thank you for that. We can have Victoria. Okay. don't think Victoria is able to speak. If you're again unable to speak, please do type it in the chat box. I see one from Denebo who is from SIFA Ethiopia. Word that best describes them is delicious, and topic of the day is collaboration. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for joining this conversation today. We are really excited to be having this time together. It's one where we get to learn, where we get to engage.
Sorry for the interruption. May I introduce myself? Sorry.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Abu, yes.
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Abu Rajo. I am from Wagogutu Foundation, and my country is Ethiopia. The word I love, starting from my first letters will be A. A for affordable. For the movement of building, the word I have will be the path for meaningful impact. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Abu, so much for that. And
Good morning. I can also introduce myself now.
finally, thank you, Halima. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Halima Hussein. I work for Womankind Kenya from Kenya. And the word that describes best about me is humbleness. I'm humble. And the word that relates to this topic today is shifting power. Thank you.
Shifting power is very, very important. How do we move from, Kenyans would relate to this, so having like a bottom-up effect, the whole aspect of localization, power back to the people. I love that. Thank you so much for that. So at this juncture, first of all, thank you all for your wonderful introductions. It's really great to, meet all of you, get to hear your voices, hopefully also get to see you and hear your voices even more as we continue. But we all come from African, backgrounds. We're Africans, and so it's not okay for us to continue without having, our guests or the persons who have really made this happen and made this possible to just welcome us officially. And so without further ado, I'd like to invite Stanley to just, welcome us to this forum, invite us, you cut a ribbon, make it start for us. So Stanley, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Rashid, for taking us through this session. It has been indeed a great day. And we, the African Institute for Children's Studies, we are determined to driving this localization agenda. We work in a consortium of 11 member organizations coming from the East and Southern Africa. And we have 5 member countries bringing us 2 organizations each in the consortium. So we are very privileged to be leading this consortium as the African Institute for Children's Studies. Today, we saw the need of, inviting people for this important session on how we can build a strong social movement. And we are glad to host you. Back to you, Mr. Rashid.
Thank you, Stanley.
And Rashid, may I interrupt? I see one of my colleagues here, Mr. Samuel Munyuin. Yes. Maybe I would want to officially introduce him. And if he could feel free to unmute and speak. Samuel?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, I'm on transit, but I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Well, I really want to thank Stanley and indeed everyone who's joined and their colleagues from Development Dynamics. Like Stanley has said, we started off as an organization from the focus on building capacity for people in our continent to respond to various needs at community level, children, humanitarian situation. So this is really great. And talking about movement building, it goes into a shared vision, agreeing to be more innovative, and for you to really change things, you can't do it alone. So we are grateful that we are doing this, and I want to believe it goes beyond just doing a training into really building a network that we can rely on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. And I think, Rashid, you can proceed with the session.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stanley and Samuel, also for just seeing the need to bring us here together to have this co-creation and co-workshop together. I think as you're all mentioning the aspects of teamwork, the aspects of collaboration, the aspects of building together, it really is the core values of even us as Africans. You talk about Ubuntu. If you want to go far, go alone. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. And so that's what is bringing us here today. And I'm really, really excited that we get to have this opportunity to just interact, learn from each other, and get to just, share what are those pain points that we have around movement building, and how do we continue to build something that is not just for now, but something that is very sustainable. At this juncture, I'd also just like to quickly introduce who I am and where I come from and what we do, so that we don't seem like you are talking to a stranger. My name is, as I mentioned, Rashid Mutaha. Sorry, is there somebody speaking?
Yes.
Oh,
I
yeah.
wanted to ask if I could introduce myself before you go.
Absolutely, Daktari. I apologize for that. That is not a good thing. Daktari, please go
No
ahead.
worries, Rashid. I just wanted to say good morning to everyone on the call. My name is Michael Kirago. I work for the African Institute for Children's Studies as an associate, and my word is Magnificent Michael. And for the day, I believe the word is connectedness. I just also wanted to express my gratitude to Development Dynamics and everyone around who's joined the call. This is an exciting moment to build a movement around localization. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Magnificent Michael. I love that. That's a very interesting adjective to utilize. And we hope that throughout the day and tomorrow, you will show that magnificence quite clearly. So as I was saying, my name is Rashid David Mutaha. I work for Development Dynamics, and who we are as DD, we are a think tank, do tank, and consulting firm. And what this means as a think tank, we work to collect insights and just create insights, research, and an understanding of what the social impact sector is going through to be able to share it out with our community of practice. As a do tank, we are working with funders, we are working with organizations, we're working with NGOs to secure, manage, and amplify their money or their financial resources to be able to ensure that it gets to the grassroots as much as possible. And as a consulting firm is really just this: how do we capacity build organizations in different aspects of learning, of strategy, design, and execution, of movement building, and ensure that we are priming organizations to be future fit, future ready, and future flex, that they can see what's going on, be ready to understand the different dynamics that happen within the social impact sector, and be able to tackle it head on. And how we do this is through three different things. One is around design thinking, one is around systems practice, and the other is on strategic foresights. Design thinking, again, is what we're speaking about here today. How do we ensure that everything is really localized to the end user? How do we ensure that for whatever aspects that we have, for whatever conversations that we're doing, for whatever strategies and innovations that we are creating, how do we ensure that the end user is really taken into consideration? And how do we also maximize how all conversations are very interconnected? If you're speaking about health, if you're speaking about climate change, if you're speaking about economic justice, they all have aspects that interconnect and interrelate. So how do we create those connections so that we're not responding to just one need of the user, but really looking at the end user from a holistic perspective, and then also strategic foresights. It's a lot of the times we tend to create, design, and try to understand programs and projects and even our solutions from a now perspective, but not look at it from the future perspective. So how do we also create what the future looks like, or design what our ideal future looks like, and then begin creating solutions for that future in the now, so that we don't get to that point where we're being reactive, but are actually proactive, that we've already understood or somehow have an understanding of what could be, and begin creating those solutions at this point in the time, or at this point in time. Some of the sectors that we've worked in are around adolescent and youth development, peace and conflict resolution, climate resilience, public health emergencies, democratic governance, rights, including those for queer justice, digital health, sexual reproductive health, education, gender transformative programming, sustainable livelihoods, and HIV prevention, care, and treatment. And the reason there's a dotted line between all of this is that, again, none of them work in a silo. They all have interconnectedness to them. And I believe I've mentioned that our pathway to impact, again, is on those three things: design thinking to uncover the human-centered drive or human-centered insights that drive innovative solutions, systems practice for analyzing the interconnectedness in our lives, in our daily happenings, and then finally strategic foresights for mapping scenarios, just to be able to anticipate what that change might be and adapt to those in our current strategy. And with that being said, I'd like to officially begin. With just a quick introduction. Really at the end of the day, when you talk about movements, they are I just want to again relate to some of the words that we were using. It's around collaboration. It's around moving together. It's around ensuring that no one person is left behind. So movements are the heartbeat of social change. And as we speak about the African context, it's really helping us to reshape narratives that have existed, narratives that have already been predisposing us on a negative perspective. It's helping us to challenge some of the injustices that are happening in our society, and already creating a space for us to foster what the next step or what the progress might be or looks like. And so I want us to imagine this, that, when you have one twig, when you're holding one stick, it's very brittle and it's very weak, and you can easily, but if you're holding quite a bunch of them, then it becomes a bit harder. It's when you have to try and use your knee or your shin. It becomes a bit unbreakable. And that's the essence of what we are. It's for us to be able to come together. It's for us to be able to speak louder, and to even have a stronger position on some of the aspects that we're speaking about or trying to advocate for. And in the words of just looking at some of our history, Kwame Nkrumah, the Mau Mau, looking at, fight for independence in South Africa, and back again to what I mentioned earlier, which is the aspect of Ubuntu, is that if we really want to go far, we must go together. And that's why we are here today. It's to really design, understand what are the aspects that we're missing for us to keep on moving together. What are those factors that we need to utilize strongly so that we are not existing in a silo and having our own individual efforts and hoping that it can actually maximize to something, but trying to realize those different connectors that bring us together as a consortium, those different connectors that bring us together, that we can be able to work collaboratively, we can be able to participate and ensure that all our solutions have as maximum impact as possible with the communities that we're serving. And that being said, I'd like to just say, buckle up. Let's be ready to dive into this, to be able to explore how movements can weave magic, how we can be able to create messages for our advocacy and lobbying, how we can also be able to just, again, as one person mentioned, take back power or shift power, shift the narrative, shift the conversation, and be accountable both individually and also as a consortium, as a partner of organizations that are working together. Let's become the movement that is creating solutions for the future. With that understanding and brief introduction, I'd love to now immediately jump into some of the findings that we got from the needs assessment, which will really base the conversation of today. There was a form that was sent out, and I appreciate everyone that was able to really fill it out, everyone who gave their time to give in their responses, to share their kind of understanding. We were looking at a couple of aspects around movement building, around advocacy, around strategic planning. We were trying to understand what would be the training and capacity needs that are needed for this workshop. Just trying to also see what are the organizational challenges that have been limiting us from having the potential for movement building. Also seeing what are some of the areas that are required for support to strengthen the collaborations. And so I won't go through the entire needs assessment, but I will just capture some of the key things that were coming up, and then we can have like a 5-minute discussion on, is this the responses that we were getting? Is there anything else that we'd want to be further clarified? And then we can now jump into our introduction for movement building. And that being said, on the aspect of localization, and we were trying to just see how do you describe, or how would you describe the current organizations, the current approach to localization for the organizations and for the different participants that responded. And we had a three-way tie for this, with 33.3% saying that localization is fully embedded in the strategy and operations. Another 33 saying that is somewhat part of the organization's programs, but it lacks an aspect of consistency, especially for the implementation aspect. And another 33 mentioning that it's in the beginning of exploration. It's in the beginning of understanding. It's in the beginning of what's next. How do we pilot these initiatives? And so this was one that, again, was just taking, it was a divided kind of understanding of what localization looks like. But as we continue, there's just an aspect of, then the question was, what are the challenges and what are those significant challenges that we are facing, especially with regards to how we advance local leadership and community-driven approaches? And a majority of us were of the aspect of that we don't have challenges. And this, what we were deriving from this is that it's not that the challenges are almost non-existent. It's the strategies for advancing this that is what is lacking. It's the strategies for understanding of how we move together as a team is where we are kind of trying to, really understand and create the aspects of this, better create how it happens together as a team, better create the strategies for community engagement, for external, for stakeholder engagement, for reaching out to our donors, for really understanding how do we bridge that gap as donors and as a team of PIPs or as a team of organizations working together. And so 66.7% said that we don't have challenges in this case, whereas for the rest, it was divided between the lack of technical organizational capacity, resistance from external donors, and limited access to funding. And again, this will come up throughout the day around how do we ensure that we are reaching to the right people at the right time with the right message, both on the stakeholder perspective, on the donor perspective, and also on the end user perspective. And then how do we also ensure that we are creating the resources that are really required for our movements to not just be established, but to grow and flourish. Then we had the question around familiarity with the key principles of movement building. And here we were seeing that 44% of us were very familiar, 33% were moderately familiar, and 11% were somewhat familiar, and another 11% were not familiar. And this is not something that we should be afraid of. It's really just, movement building takes on so many different aspects and so many different forms. And so when some of us are saying that we're very familiar while others are of the opinion of not being familiar, it just means that we are operating from a playing field where we do have the ball, but we're understanding how do we really play around with this ball. And I apologize if my metaphors are a bit unhinged, but it's how I try or see it as a good way to make things more relatable and more understandable. And so here we're just seeing that there's really a need again to ensure that even as we're speaking about the principles of movement building, is that we're not speaking about it with different levels of understanding, but speaking about it from the same level of understanding, in that when we leave, by the time we're ending this workshop tomorrow and having the needs assessment that is continual over the next month, is that movement building is not one that is described in different contexts for the different organizations that are represented here, but it's one that has a sort of similar explanation to it, in that if I ask Abu, or I ask Halima, or if I'm asking Stanley, or I'm asking Michael, is that we are able to just explain movement building from a similar kind of lens, is that we're able to say that movement building for us is around collaboration or actions, or it's around the aspect of sustainability, in that our definition of movement building and the definition of the strategies we utilize for movement building are almost similar, and we're not speaking from two different lenses. Then we asked around the skills and knowledge that we might be lacking, especially as organizations, when it comes to creating and sustaining movements. And here we're seeing that it's again almost a similar comparison or a similar divide, especially around advocacy and lobbying, resource mobilization, and communication and visibility. And the reason earlier on I was saying that we have the strategies is that this aspect of effective community engagement methods was not really picked on, in that we are already communicating and reaching out and having some conversations with our communities, but we need to amplify how that is happening. But what was really coming up as a big thing is, what's the aspect of leadership, and how do we strategically plan, especially for our movements? How do we ensure that as we're creating our movements, that we are priming ourselves up for success and not for failure? In that as we are doing movement building, who's really leading the whole perspective, or the whole aspect of that movement? Who's guiding or giving strategic direction? And how are we all moving together as a consortium so that no one person is left behind? How do we ensure that in this leadership perspective and in this leadership conversation, that it doesn't end up that one person or just a few organizations are really getting it and hitting the mark correctly and effectively, and then we have other organizations that are not moving together with us? And when that happens, then it creates a sense of that we are again, as I mentioned earlier, having 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. So we're not really effective with how our growth is happening. And as we mentioned, Ubuntu is really the aspect of all of us moving together. And this aspect that were mentioned over here of leadership, advocacy and lobbying, and resource mobilization will be some of the conversations that we'll be having over the next couple of days that really help us to ensure that even as we're creating our action plan, we are effective in ensuring that everybody is considered and taken together in the process. Then there's a question on some of the barriers, especially to visibility and recognition. And here we had majority, again, the aspect of resources coming up, in that there's inadequate funding to support visibility efforts. We had another 22.2% also talking about lack of donor flexibility, which is really speaking, even as we talk about our communication strategy, as we speak about how we effectively respond to our stakeholders, and our stakeholders sometimes being the donors, how do we ensure we are telling the right story? How do we ensure that we are communicating effectively about our impact? How do we ensure that even as we're saying that we're bringing in this whole quagmire of what movement building is, so that it doesn't continue to be a siloed conversation, sorry, but it's something that we're speaking about as a collective, in that we're able to also show the value and the value of working in collaboration as partners, working in collaboration as a movement, so that donors are continually funding such aspects and such progressive measures. Then we also had some other respondents talking about marginalization and systemic inequalities, the aspects of compelling messaging to attract attention, and also the aspects of just donor flexibility. And so really what we're seeing as a recurring theme over here is that we really, as we're talking about advocacy and lobbying for localization, there should also be the shift where we're doing advocacy and lobbying towards our donors, towards funders, and to ensure that resources within organizations are continually, being administered, so that we can be able to have effective movement building. There's also an aspect that we need to think about when you talk about resources, alternative resources, models of resourcing, so that we're not just speaking about resource mobilization from one aspect of, let it be donor driven, but also resource mobilization from where else can we get this money? Are we thinking about public-private partnerships? Are we considering the aspects of how we are working in collaboration with other organizations? Are we seeing how our movement building efforts can be strategically placed within other programs that we already have funding for, and create that need for it, so that it continues to happen, whether it's happening naturally or also strategically. And so these are some of the barriers that we're seeing for visibility and recognition. Then we had an interesting question where we were just trying to see, again, for the members of the consortium, how we describe the level of collaboration that's happening amongst us as members. And this was interesting because, we may be saying or speaking, and again, all of these responses were taken in confidentiality, so don't believe or think that I have who the respondents are. But it was quite interesting to see that for a majority of our respondents, we were saying that there's a need for improvement, wherein we're saying that there's an aspect of collaboration that already exists, but that inconsistency is what is limiting us from really reaching our true potential. And so there's a need to just improve how we work together as a consortium. And at this point, I'd really just like to give some thumbs up to Stanley, who also saw the need for not only having this movement building training for the CRHA consortium, but also bringing in some of the different partners who are working around the localization aspect, because that's the first step of improving how we work together as or how we work together in collaboration, in looking at it not just as us as the consortium, but also being cognizant of the different people and the different organizations and the different partners that we're working with on the ground, who are helping us really move this conversation further, and really helping us to understand and see the value of us working collaboratively. And so Stanley, for that, I really give thumbs up and like a good clap and celebration. And if I was next to you, I'd give you flowers for just ensuring that this conversation and this workshop and training is able to truncate down to other organizations that are really moving this work on the ground. So thank you for that. And so really here we're seeing that at the end of the day, we're saying that there's an aspect that needs improvement, and especially around consistency, so that we're not speaking about movement building from one lensed view and saying that it's happening today, and then 6 months down the line, we're not speaking about it again, but we are able to just consistently build it. And the hope is that by the end of tomorrow, with us creating that action plan and also having that conversation that's going to be continuing for the needs assessment, that we're able to create those networks, create those missing, or build up on those missing pieces to see how collaboration continues to happen amongst us, to be able to see how that consistency in communication is existing, to be able to see how leadership within this movement, within us as a consortium, is being fostered in different ways, so that we don't talk about inconsistency, but next time when we're having a conversation is now how do we move to the next step of making it more effective and making it more sustainable. And then, and speaking about the aspect of how it strengthen collaborations within the members of CRHA, we had a majority or a very interesting mix between having more networking and relationship building opportunities, having joint training programs, having shared platforms for coordinated advocacy, and having dedicated funding for collaborative projects. And so again, we see that aspect, or we see that the theme that is coming up again around funding and resources. And this is going to be a huge conversation that we'll especially dive into tomorrow. You know, how do we resource mobilize for our movements? How do we, again, look for alternative sources of funding? How do we ensure that we are not having that inconsistency because of lack of resources, but from one way or the other, on our own individual perspectives, we're able to create a resource hub that allows us to have conversations on movement building, have capacity building sessions. How are we also creating a space where we have all this knowledge and resources just collated together, whether it's on the AICS website, whether it's going to be existing independently, but it allows us to, on our own individual way and in our own individual capacities, ensure that resourcing is happening for our movements. But also, there's really that big aspect of advocacy and ensuring that our advocacy efforts do not just happen in silos, do not just happen in our own little cocoons and expecting for change to happen, but being able to have collaborative advocacy. And this is a conversation, again, that we'll dive into tomorrow, where we'll create that advocacy chain and advocacy link and be able to see how, from both an individual perspective, we are contributing towards our advocacy efforts, and then from now a consortium lens, what our end goal is with our advocacy and how each of us is collaborating to ensure that we are reaching that end goal. And as in Kiswahili, we like to say, haba na haba hujaza kibaba. So each small individual initiative, each small individual input actually moves us towards our collective and overall goal and objective and output as a consortium. Then I'm really just talking about the aspect of networking and relationship building. So I'm mentioning this because they have some really interesting and key interlinkages we can be able to see in one way or the other. And as we continue throughout tomorrow, we'll begin to just now break it down further and see what these linkages look like and how we can ensure that at each different point, from both individual and collective perspectives, we're able to bridge that gap and bridge those linkages so that we're moving together. Remember, as a participant mentioned, is that movement building is really around collaborative efforts and collaborative action. And then I believe this is the final slide from the needs assessment, is that which are the training topics that would be most valuable. Again, we see the aspects of, sorry about that. We see the aspects of leadership development coming back up again. So how do we ensure that our movements, we are thinking about leadership and mobilization from the onset, so that this really brings in the aspect of how it can also continue to be consistent as we continue to grow and evolve. Then advocacy and lobbying also having a majority of respondents saying that this has to also be really factored in and considered. Then coalition building for partnership, resource mobilization and fundraising, monitoring and evaluation, which is a key component, because how then do we tell our stories of impact? As we are getting funders, as we are getting donors to join the bandwagon, where are we getting our data? How are we able to share what we've been able to do so far? And so monitoring and evaluation for movements is a key component that needs to be factored in. Then there's the aspects of also, living in this digital age and in this digital space. Then how do we utilize efforts with regards to digital engagement tools for communication, for advocacy, for our movement building, for campaigning, for our advocacy efforts. So not leaving out or not factoring out the aspect that digital engagement continues to be one of the factors that plays a key role in movement building, that plays a key role in how we are engaging communities, that plays a key role in how we are ensuring that we are reaching out to every single person. And so not speaking that digital engagement will be the key component, but it's just a factor that also needs to be considered, because as we mentioned, this is all about localization. And in localization, sometimes digital tools are not our best friends, but we also will be working collaboratively with that. And that being said, before I invite again for just quick comments or feedback from that, I come back to our overview of the training workshop to just show that from the needs assessment, we were able to just pick up what are those key insights that we're seeing that are formulating how we'll be able to have this 2-day conversation. In that for today, we'll be really just setting the stage, and setting the stage is basically giving that foundational analysis that we can begin to work from. And here's where again we'll be looking at what does movement building actually mean. How do we understand localization? What are the different barriers that present themselves around localization? And how do we begin doing advocacy and lobbying for localization? And as we're doing advocacy and lobbying, how do we ensure that they're community-centered? And when we set that stage, then tomorrow we can begin that aspect of action planning, or moving from vision to action. So how do we design our sustainable movement as CRHA? How do we ensure that we are monitoring and evaluating our impact on each of the different steps that we're taking? How do we also develop a shared vision? And we'll have a quick moment to just sit down and develop this vision for us. What does it look like? What's our end goal? What's the impact that we're hoping to achieve? What are the different strategies that we shall utilize to ensure that consistency continues to be a key factor and a key component for us as a movement, so that we are sustaining and growing our movement. We have that aspect of longevity and not just having it for the here and now. And then leadership. What is our leadership angle looking at or looking like? What are the aspects that we need to consider for our leadership and resource mobilization? And how do these contribute to our movement building efforts? And then we'll end the day with how do we now plan for action? How do we move from just conversations to ensuring that we're really setting ourselves up for success by creating a sort of roadmap to the next steps that we're going to be taking. So at this juncture, I'd like to take a pause and invite for the next, it's at 10:23, so for 5 minutes, maybe if someone has a quick reflection, a quick comment that they'd like to make, or even and also appreciate for all the respondents that took the time to fill in the needs assessment form. taking a pause and inviting for any quick feedback, comments, reflections, and or just ideas that as we now move into the next bit of introduction to movement building. So you feel free to unmute yourselves and share your comments or feedbacks. Anyone? Going once. Going twice. Okay, so I see there's no comments so far, but I've seen in the chat space from Denebo who says, thank you for your brief, really appreciated. Thank you so much for that. So there being no comments thus far, I believe we are good to continue. Unless, oh yes, I see somebody has unmuted. Please go ahead and speak. Mesele, is there something you want to say?
Yeah, I'm just a newcomer here. I just attended and joined this movement today. The studies you have conducted before and the presentation you have done is very good. It is very insightful. It shows our understanding of localization and where we are up to now. I'm really happy to be part of this team. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Mesele, for that. So I think we can do the first bit of introduction to movement building before we take our first virtual break. Because, looking at a screen for a long time, and even studies show that after an hour and a half, we start losing people. So we can just do a quick introduction to what movement building is. Then we'll take a break with a question that will be posted on the slide deck, which I will invite us over that break period to just share on the chat space, which I will be collecting and then put it on a slide deck that will now come back to. But we officially begin our conversation on movement building. And before I even start, I'd just like to read some of the responses that were really coming up when you're talking about movement building, because we did have a question on our understanding or individual understanding of movement building. And for the respondents that we had within the needs assessment, we were saying that for us, we describe movement building as one, the collective actions in collaboration with partners and stakeholders, the aspect of creating sustainable force of people and ideas that propel a given agenda through different stages, the process of organizing, mobilizing, empowering a collective group of persons with a shared cause, vision, and goal to create a unified effort to address social, political, environmental, and economic issues, and also partnering with local actors to strengthen their capacities and coming together as one to influence change on shared cause. And I highlight some of these responses because they're really important. One, because we're seeing some key words that are coming out. We're seeing aspects of having it around organizing people. We're seeing the aspect of collective action and collective mobilization and collective goals, in that it's not happening in a silo, but it's happening collaboratively. We are seeing the aspects of strategic effort, that we're not just moving around or working with a sense of it will all be good at the end of the day, but we're being strategic around how we resource mobilize, how we are creating that shared vision and understanding, how we have a shared goal. We're being strategic about how we are talking to our stakeholders and donors. We're also seeing the aspect of partnerships and sustainability, so that when we work in collaboration, when we work together, when we work as a consortium, when we work as a group of people with a shared vision, then we can have sustainability happening, in that we are able to bring in our different resources. We are able to ensure that our agenda through the different stages is not being moved or swayed by what is happening in the local or economic or global politics, but we have a goal that we're working towards. And so as when we stand together, we stand strong. And so our working definition today for movement building is really built around those key aspects. Is that movement building is the aspect of organizing and motivating people to work towards a collective vision or cause that is especially important for the communities that we're serving. And you see, again, we're coming back to those keywords, how we're working together as a team, how we are ensuring that the community is the one that is the end user of this initiative, is really benefiting from this, and how we're ensuring that at the end of the day, this process of bringing forward a powerful idea and getting other people to join the cause has a resounding and compounding effect that gets the message across and in front of even the policymakers and the general public. We're seeing that movement building is different from grassroots organizing, because grassroots organizing is done at an individual level. But when it comes to movement building, we are working collectively as a group of people. We have a common social change. We have a goal that we are intending to reach. We have shared values, shared beliefs, and collective action. That movement building can be done in both formal and informal spaces. It can be done from a local and a global perspective. And I'm really excited that even as we were introducing ourselves, we're already seeing that this consortium is moving towards that aspect of a regional lens, because we have members from Kenya, we have Ethiopia being very well represented. So we're not looking at it as just a Kenyan conversation, but we're seeing how this is going to be resonating with us as a global or as a regional organization, as a regional arm. We're trying to see what is that collective goal that we're working towards, what is that vision that we have. And as mentioned, tomorrow, we really dive into creating that shared vision for all of us together as a consortium, in that as we end this process of the movement building workshop, we're not leaving with a different understanding of what we're doing as CRHA, but we're able to create a draft theory of change of what our impact will be, what our goal at the end of the day is, and what are the different activities that we can undertake as individual organizations that really build this consortium together. And so, again, movement building for us is the aspect of organizing and motivating people towards a collective vision or cause that is important for the communities that we are serving. And we are being either specific on our issue and we are being specific on the goals and the vision that we have. But as we say that, and I mentioned a couple of things around shared values, shared beliefs, and collective action. This is kind of the framework that we'll also utilize to just create what our framework for CRHA also looks like when we speak about movement building, in that we have the movement identity, we have the journey, and we have the different when you talk about the movement identity, it's within this inner circle over here, the inner circle that talks about the shared values, the shared purpose, and the shared experience that we want to have as a collective. And again, as we were mentioning the definition of movement building, we've been throwing around these words, values, our shared vision, our shared goal. And so the very basic aspect of movement building is around the identity that we are creating for ourselves. And our identity is formed by these three things: our values, our purpose, and our experience. We are recognizing that we are all living in different contexts, that what is localization for us in Nairobi is not the same aspect or definition of localization for someone else in Kisumu. It's not the same definition of localization for someone else in Turkana, because I had someone mention that they're from the northern part of Kenya. It's not the same as localization in Ethiopia, but if you're able to have value assets that we recognize and we hold on to together as a consortium, if we have a purpose that is driving us, moving us towards our intended goal and our intended objective, and we have experiences that we can share and learn from together, then we can create an identity that describes us as a CRHA consortium. Then number two, it's around our journey. Where are we going? What are we intending to do? Whom are we intending to reach? And our journey, again, is also created around three things. What is the actions that we're taking that are really meaningful and have impact within the communities that we are serving? What is engagement looking like? And how do we ensure that our engagement is not from a very surface level, but is very purposeful? That we are able to speak to the needs and wants of our communities, that we're able to relate to our communities, that we're able to really understand their perspective, understand where it is that they're coming from, understand what are their pain points and their needs, and really engaging them from a level of understanding and empathy. And that's the whole aspect of why we also utilize aspects of like design thinking and human-centered design. So how do we that our engagements are very purposeful and meaningful? And number three, what are rewards and incentives? And this becomes a very kind of controversial conversation when you're having around rewards and incentives. But rewards and incentives can be described in so many different ways. It's what is the being a part of this movement? And we'll be able to just describe that, especially tomorrow when we're moving towards action. How does being a part of the CRHA consortium actually, move into a collective kind of action? How does being a part of the consortium also, amplify the kind of efforts that we have as individual organizations? What are the rewards that we're seeing even for our communities that we're serving? And by being able to understand our action, our purposeful engagement, and the incentives and rewards that we're getting, then we can describe the journey that we're going to be taking. And then finally, it's around the enablers, because as we mentioned, movement building is around collaborative action. It's around collaborative efforts. And this ensures that there's different factors that enable for this to happen effectively. And so who are those enablers that we have? And for enablers, we're looking at 4 different aspects. It's on communication, and this has been mentioned quite a bit. How are we doing communication to both our donors? How are we having effective communication to our stakeholders? How are we communicating effectively and building those moments for our communities that we're serving? How are we also organizing? How are we meeting people where they are and not asking them to come to us? How are we ensuring that we are really diving deep into the communities that we're serving and reaching out to them in their places of comfort, in the places where they feel safe? How are we also creating safe spaces as a consortium to ensure that as we speak to our communities, to our the end user, that our organizing is able to have some meaningful impact? Then what does sustainability look like? How are we creating or setting ourselves up for longevity in the future and not just a now kind of thing? How are we seeing that this CRHA consortium is not just going to have like a boom and a splash and, like really have maximum conversation happening, especially now in January that we are starting with a movement building capacity training workshop. And then when we come 6 months later, efforts have, diminished. We are looking at aspects of us not being able to collaborate or work together anymore. So how does that sustainability happen? And then finally, what's the data that we're collecting? Who are the people that we're reaching? What's that community that we are creating? And how do we ensure that our community continues to grow and thrive? And that's why you can see on the sides, we have the aspect of our people and our impact. Our people are around the CRM and our data, and our impact is on our communications and our organizing, to just ensure that we're not living in this silo or living in this space where we believe we're making impact, we're having progress, but at the end of the day, for the persons that we're serving, it's not amounting to much. And so this will kind of be the framework that will continue to develop and continue to just answer to, again, identify our movement identity, our movement journey, and the different enablers that we need to be, aware of as we continue to build this movement. But as I say that, it's important to recognize that movements don't just exist in a silo or don't just come to fruition from nowhere. Is that at its core, there's 4 different aspects that really make movements thrive. 1, they activate and organize diverse people, organizations, and coalitions towards recognizing a shared vision. And I believe we've really been mentioning this from the definition that I shared, and also the definition that came up from the needs assessment, and also from just our understanding, or in one word, what we talk about movement building to be, is that we're working towards a shared vision and a shared goal, and we're trying to activate people. We're trying to activate our communities to recognize and realize that this is what we want to achieve at the end of the day. Then we have number 2, is the aspects of strengthening connections across people, across organizations, and across issues, so that we can coordinate efforts and align our activism and our advocacy. In that, again, we're not just working in a silo. We're not believing that as my organization, as CIFA, I have all the answers and I know all the solutions that my community needs. We're able to just recognize that even in this community, there's so many other people, there's so many other factors, there's so many other organizations that are also working in within this. There's also the aspect of interconnectedness of some of these problems that we're trying to find solutions to. So how do we strengthen these connections across individuals, across organizations, across other movements, to ensure that we are coordinating our efforts and our activism and our advocacy is really aligned towards that shared vision and that shared goal. And then number 3, it's around the community. How do we ensure that we're really lifting up their voices? We're really speaking to the core of their needs and their wants, that we're able to understand the vision that people are having, that we're able to also be empathetic towards their lived experiences, that we're able to bring in the ones that were most impacted by the issue, to share from their own understanding and from their own lens what could be the best solutions. Because as we speak about movements, we have to remember that the core value, the core impact of any movement is that individual perspective. And that's the whole aspect of, even when we speak about localization, it will come up, is that how we ensuring that the voices of our people, the voices of our communities are really being taken into consideration. And finally, how are we combining research, data, advocacy, media, campaigns, community organizing, so that our efforts leads or drives towards a sustainable change? How are we utilizing different other aspects? Because movement building exists from a very broad lens. And in order to achieve a movement, And in order to create different strategies for sustainability, we also have to recognize what are the different actions that we can take from the ground that ensures that we reach this top level effort. And that's around advocacy. That's around media, both old traditional media and new media platforms, to get our message out there, to be able to communicate to different stakeholders. That's around even campaigning, how we ensuring that we have different campaign efforts that we're taking up, so that the community is aware of the actions that we're taking, that the community is moving up in our ladder of engagement and our ladder of communication, from simply just being followers to actually leading the efforts of the movements. Because the moment we have the community owning the efforts, then we began to tackle what sustainability looks like. And at a later stage of this conversation, we'll be able to just look at that engagement model or the ladder of engagement and see what are the different actions we can be taking for that as a consortium, and how do we ensure that we're meeting people at these different stages with different strategies and actions to move them further up to actually being owners of the entire conversation. And as I mentioned, there's different stages of movement building. One, we have the emergence and formation. We have organization and mobilization, momentum and growth, impact and achievements, and sustainability and legacy. Now, I highlight this slide because a lot of our movements tend to get to the organization and mobilization, and then have this peak moment that allows us to have momentum and growth, and we really get support. We get all the different stakeholders that we're reaching out to support the efforts that we're making, to support our actions, to support our collaborative efforts. But when it comes to sustainability and legacy, we are unable to tackle that. And I'd like to even use the example of Kenya. This is not making this a political conversation, but using it simply and merely as an example. So don't think I'm politicizing this. But let me use the Gen Z revolution or the Gen Z protests that were happening sometime last year. We had the emergence and formation, where young people were using social media to really just get the message out there. Do you know what's happening with I believe the conversation was on the finance bill? Yes. So do you know what's happening with the finance bill? Have you understood about the finance bill? What do you know about it? And so from different spaces on the digital space, Gen Zs were emerging to give information, to make other Gen Zs or other young people aware of what's going on, to form a kind of collective vision that we need to create action towards not amending this finance bill, not having it pass into law. And so that was the aspect of emergence and formation. And then it moved into organization and mobilization, where now we were seeing posters going out on X, on Twitter, on TikTok, that tomorrow we are mobilizing together. We are going out to the streets. We are going to be having demonstrations and peaceful protests around the finance bill. We want it to be rejected. We do not want it to be amended into law for 2024. We want it to be changed. So from the emergence and having young people just being able to form and create these conversations we have together as a Gen Z movement, for instance, we were now moving into the streets and mobilizing each other, calling a friend. Are you going for the protest? Where do we meet? This is what you're wearing. This is how we'll show up. So that mobilization really took place. And that's what we call that peak moment of a movement, in that it peaked at that point, that now we are all going together. However, if we use this as a case example, talking about now the momentum and growth, that's where some things were lacking. And as we were speaking earlier, we were saying that movements require strategy in order to be able to have longevity and sustainability. And using this case example of the Gen Z movement, momentum and growth was a bit lacking. in that there was no strategies for how the Gen Zs were working together in collaboration. It was now a point of who's the leader of this movement, or it's a leaderless movement. And then in other areas, you see somebody popping up or cropping up and saying, no, I am the leader of the Gen Z movement, and this is what we're saying. Then in another space, we hear somebody else cropping up and saying, no, I am the leader of the Gen Z movement, and this is what we're trying to ask for. And so because of a lack of leadership and a lack of clear identity of who or where it is that the protest or the movement was going, then that momentum and growth just really dipped. And so in latter stages of the Gen Z movement of protests or demonstrations, you were seeing that you'd see a poster that's saying, tomorrow we're out in the streets, but only a handful of young people are showing up, or a handful of demonstrators are showing up. Case in point, previously, when there was a and mobilization, when you're seeing Tuesday we're in the streets, Thursday we're in the streets, the entire of Nairobi was completely full. Now that momentum and growth, because of lack of leadership, the lack of a strategy, the lack of a collective vision, because now there's different crops popping up each and every place, then momentum and growth did not happen for the Gen Z movement, in that there was no impact at the end of the day. There were some significant or notable outcomes, but the impact was not really as realized. And then the sustainability and legacy. The only legacy that was left is that Gen Z can actually mobilize, but then what happens after that? And so every movement goes through different aspects of growth and development. And we're hoping that as we speak about this CRHA movement, as we continue to design and define what it looks like for us, is that we'll not be stuck at the organization and mobilization, where we're able to just get support, have a bunch of us folks coming together for a workshop or a training and different conversations here and there, but not really seeing the long-term impact or the long-term goal that we have. And so we are hoping that we can create that action plan that leads us to sustainability and legacy, that really helps us to achieve what is the next step for us. What is that big goal that we're hoping to see? What is that legacy that we want to leave in the next year, in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years? And we'll be able to just create what our impact at the end of the day looks like, so that we can backtrack and see what are the different conversations that we need to be having now for that longevity and sustainability. And here is just a diagram of some different movements that we've seen exist in the last decade and even in the last century. We have conversations such as the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. We have the Arab Spring, which took especially the Middle East and Northern Africa, with like a bang, where democracy was beginning to just be realized, where people are saying it's us as the leaders and we need to see change. We need to see change happening from a local perspective. We have the Me Too movement that cropped up towards the years of 2017, 18, and 19. We have the Black Lives Matter movement, talking about the consistent discrimination, especially amongst the African Americans in America, but not just in America, but it was also being realized in other parts of Europe. Then it moved into a larger conversation around police reforms. And so this case studies just are a clear example of how movements in their different shapes, forms, and issues that they're trying to mitigate or have a solution to, have actually been able to create some systemic change. They've been able to create conversation. They've been able to impact and ignite some aspect of collective visioning and collective formation and collective mobilization and actioning. They've been able to just ignite sparks and fires from the individual, that I have ownership and I see that this is affecting me individually, and how do I begin to create solutions for the future. And with that kind of brief introduction to movement building, as we now jump into a quick virtual break, I want to invite us into this chat space to answer these two questions. One, why are movements important? What is the aspect and the factors that we're looking for when it comes to movement building? And two, what really would motivate us to be a part of the CRHA movement building efforts? Why are we trying to work collaboratively as a consortium? What are we trying to achieve at the end of the day? What is that impact? What is that lasting change and individual? What is that lasting change that we're hoping to see? How is community and belonging going to really help us move and drive towards that? It's now 10:53. I'd like to invite us into a 15-minute virtual health break. And during this time, really in the chat space, take the moment to ponder upon these questions and begin getting the answers to it, and just type it in the chat space. After the break, we'll come back and look at some of the responses, and then we'll now dive into the next session around localization. So 10:54, I shall see all of us back together at 11:10. But again, just dive into the chat space and respond to these two questions. Thank you very much, and enjoy your quick virtual break.
Okay, thank you.
Wewe umedownload Zoom?
Hello, 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 and welcome back. If you're with me, please give me a thumbs up so I can see that we are back in the room. Let's see those thumbs up. Let's see those thumbs up. Thank you, Stanley. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Denebo. I see we're back. Mustafa Mohammed, thank you. So welcome back. I hope you've had a minute to get a coffee, replenish your energies, get ready for the next bit. And I also just want to thank everyone who has shared their views during the tea break. Before we left, we had left it on, why is this like this? We'd left it with two questions. One, why are movements important? And two, what motivates us to be a part of the CRHA movement building efforts? And I'll just read a couple of the comments that have come in. We have Denebo saying, movements are important to bring changes, to achieve common goal and objectives, and to be voice for voiceless. Collaboration and coordination, as well as working towards common goal, motivates us to be part of the CRHA movement building efforts. So again, aspects of collaboration and coordination coming in. We have Irene saying that the motivation is to initiate lasting positive changes in the different areas where we'd want to see movements are impactful. We have Vivian saying that it's mainly to have a bigger voice. So again, amplification of voice. So not to be speaking in a silo as just us, but being able to speak. When we speak as a consortium, as a collaborative, then we're able to have like a bigger voice, a louder voice. Then we have Grace Mboro, who says that movement is important because unity is strength, therefore more is accomplished. My motivation is individually, one may be limited in knowledge, therefore cannot do everything. I love that. And so even as we were saying that when we work in collaboration and when we work in movements, we're able to resources, and resources are not just financial, they're also human resources. My organization can be very well vast when it comes to capacity, when it comes to advocacy and communication, for instance. And so through my organization, we can be able to support XYZ different organizations just in getting our voices out there. Movements are important for solidarity. They help form a strong coalition for change, and in our case, solidarity to enhance localization. And being a part of CRHA motivates us to be committed to driving localization because we believe that one day it shall take effect. I love that. So also saying for synergy, for joint effort, for collaborative action. So really we are speaking the same language and just kind of the same themes and ideas of what movement building is. Now, I want us to jump into the next thing, which is around understanding localization. And we're going to do this a bit differently in the interest of time, one, and also with the, as I mentioned, development dynamics, one of our key approaches, even in facilitation, even when it comes to capacity building, even when it comes to training, is an understanding that we all come with our different ideas and perspectives that can really help shape and formulate what can be a collaborative or collective understanding. And so, as opposed to going through a presentation on localization, I'd actually want to pick your brains and have this happen in group work. Because there's different aspects and contexts when we speak about localization. There's different understandings when we speak about localization. And at this juncture, it's really just to also see from our own ends, what's the context that we base our localization on? And what are the benefits that we see when it comes to localization? Then also just linking two conversations together, what are the barriers and challenges that comes or bring forth when we speak about localization? And so we shall have to better have this well presented and to also make this community of us and this movement of ours one that is one that is allowing for it space to speak and also inclusive. We shall be breaking into two groups and we'll have a conversation. I've set a timer for 15 minutes and I've already assigned the two breakout rooms. So for group one, please pick someone who will be writing it down and also come back to present because we'll also want to hear and query and ask a couple of questions. So group one will be answering the question, what is localization and what are the benefits of it? Then group two will be looking at it from the other end, just really trying to bring out what are some of the barriers to localization, and even in our own individual organizations and as a consortium, what are the challenges or what challenges do we face when it comes to localization? What is limiting us or holding us back to really realizing localization? So for both groups, please pick someone who will be your, I don't want to say the word rapporteur, but yes, rapporteur, to take some clean notes, and then we'll be to share. So we'll be moving you. Before we do that, maybe anybody who might have a question, comment, query, or I can just move people into the groups. Any question thus far? Going. Okay, I see no questions are arising. By the way, when we come back, I'd really just want to invite as many as is possible to be participatory. I'm not a lecturer. I'm just here to co-facilitate and co-moderate with the team so that we can really arrive at a big or a good understanding and an action plan for movement building for us as CRHA. So it's good to have conversations happening together so that I don't feel like I'm speaking to myself, or else, they might take me to Mathare and say I am going mad. But that's just a joke. It's 11:20. The groups will be open for 10 minutes. And then you will come back and present for another 3 minutes per group. So that being said, go ye forth. I shall be jumping in and out of the different groups. In case you're not assigned, don't worry, I shall assign you. But for now, go ye forth and discuss. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please feel free to shoot them in the chat space. I am also on there watching it out. Hi. Hello, are we okay?
Yeah, we are. Hi, everyone. Hi.
Hi everyone, we are here.
Yeah, maybe who is going to write for us and who is going to chair for us? Leo mimi niendelea kukaa.
Sawa.
Machi tu ndio utaleta.
Sawa.
Group one, can we have somebody to lead the discussion, please? Because in the interest of time as well.
Hi, my name is Janet Irungu. I can write.
Thank you, Janet, for stepping up. Who will lead for us? It's just two questions. What is localization and what are the benefits? Somebody? Abiot, do you want to lead the group, please? Hello?
Yes.
Hello.
Abiot or Thomas, are you willing to lead the group?
Yeah, let me do it.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone. So, our first question is why
Organization agenda quite inactive. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stanley, for that. So someone can pick up from there.
Let me add on it. In addition to that power imbalance, there is also a resistance from these international NGOs. they want to go things as usual, business as usual kind of thing. And also on Ethiopian side, we don't have a law for localization. Yes, now we are trying and we are discussing with government at least to have a clear federal law, but we don't have one up to now. Over to you guys.
Okay, for me, I would say the cultural differences, in that different cultures have different customs, values, and expectations. So what works in one culture may not be appropriate in another one. So understanding and respecting these differences could be one of the barriers. That is the cultural differences. And I would tie it also with the linguistic challenges, translating content into different languages while preserving the original meaning, the context. Maybe sometimes it becomes complex. So I think those two, when tied together, cultural differences and linguistic challenges, those are the barriers that I've identified.
Yes, may I intervene?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Maybe from my side, regarding to the overall localization agendas, lack of commitment, as well as lack of working the talk we have planned at the Grand Bargain and international NGOs, and all overall, all actors will not take the step to realize and impactful as well as measurable action to progress the overall localization agendas. That is what I feel as a main barrier. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Abu.
Abu. Our sisters are very quiet. Victoria, you have something you want to share?
There is also limited resources.
Great, limited resources.
There's limited resources.
Okay.
And sometimes sustainability is a challenge.
Okay, Stanley, you had something you wanted?
The community lead, for example, any activities which are implemented at the ground level. The community identified their own problem from the beginning up to the end. So every activity should be based on the interest and the planning of the communities. Localization means from planning up implementation up to the end of the project. For example, the involvement of the community is the priorities one. Unless, for example, community lead activity should be effectively implemented on the ground, because the community are planned by themselves and also the communities are implemented by themselves. Even from the beginning of the management, the community are managing their own resource and their own everything which are found at the local level by themselves. Unless if the interference of the other guys, for example, the one is planned and come to the community and implement those activities. Those activities may be their problem on their sustainability. So when we have seen the localization means the communities are planning by themselves from the beginning up to the end. Then based on the problem of those communities, just we are prioritizing the problem of the communities. Communities are prioritizing their own problem by themselves and implementing by themselves. So their benefit is, for example, on their sustainability. For example, when we have done any activities at the ground level, if their interests of the communities are the prioritized one, on their sustainability, there is a benefit. Unless there is no sustainability, because the planned activity is not the interest of the community. So localization means any activities should be planned based on the interest of the communities and should be implemented based on the plan of the communities at the ground level. So this localization is a broad term. I think it is a broad term. It contains a lot of things from the resources which are found in the communities. wherever you are go to the down at the community level, the community should lead the all activities, even the all things which are in the hand of those communities. Unless when you are guiding, when you are implementing all activities by ourselves on their sustainability, there may be a problem. So the community should be implement all activities by themselves and should be leading those activities from the beginning up to the end. Localization means we are also involving, you are also making ourselves just like the communities. We are not leading the community should be leading us. So their benefit of there is a lot of things I think we are mentioning. This I think it is, and also there is a lot of benefit when we are making ourselves as a localization.
Okay,
This is
thank
my
you.
opinion.
Thank you, Abiot. What I'm getting is that localization is when the communities at the center of their own development, coming up with solutions for their own problems and leading the whole implementation of the solutions that they come up with for sustainability and others. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe we can move to the next one unless someone has something to add.
I would like to add
Yes, Irene.
that localization is adaptation. That when
Yes.
you get maybe a concept that may not work within the Kenyan, your concept, your location as is, your locality as is, you localize it, you adapt it to the situation in which you're working so that it makes sense and it creates better reach.
Thank you so much, Irene. So she's saying it's contextualizing solutions to suit the local environment. Thank you. Anybody else? Good. So what are the fruits? What are these fruits? What are these benefits of localizing of localization? What are the benefits that accrue from localization?
Can I try?
Yes, Janet.
One of the benefits of localization is that because it's community-led, there is sustainability of the actions and the projects.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, another benefit, strengthening local capacity. Thank you. Thank you, Danapo. Another benefit. Ownership. Local ownership. Thank you.
When we localize activities, we are able to plan for response on crisis or even readjust when things are not working. So we are able to be more responsive to actions.
Thank you. Another, I can see the NAB has written strengthening of local capacity, use of local resources to ensure sustainability. Another, ownership. Yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you, Grace. Another response.
Also, localization helps to facilitate the community to lead their own solutions. We're encouraging, when we localize activities, we encourage the community to also come up with their own solutions.
Local solutions. Thank you. Thank you so much. Another, is there anyone else here who wants to contribute something? Thank you. Thank you. So, Janet, maybe you can tell us
And I tend to believe that we are all back. So welcome back post the discussion. I was moving around rooms and really enjoyed what I was hearing. So at this juncture, maybe we can invite group one to share what came up from the discussion. And we can listen in, get some interesting insights, and see what next. So group one, feel free to take it away, please.
Presentation for group one. My name is Janet Irungu. We were tackling the understanding of localization and the benefits of localization. Our understanding for localization was we are having local problems for local solutions. It involves seamless interactions with the local people, use the local resources that are available. Localization also comes from the word loca, which is community-led. Community planning from planning to implementation should be community-led. This is also empowering local responders to lead and deliver action plan for sustainability to be realized. It is also empowering local actors. Localization is adaptation. When we're replicating activities from other areas or other continents, we should contextualize these activities to the immediate actors. Then also it focuses on local knowledge. Question 2 was the benefits. What are the benefits of localization? We are able to plan well to respond to crisis. We're able to facilitate community-led solutions. We're able to promote long-term recovery and development seamlessly. We are able to have sustainability, ownership, and strengthening of local capacity. We also focus on the local knowledge to be able to have sustainability. Finished.
Thank you for that, Janet, and thank you, Group One. I love some of the aspects that are coming up. You're speaking about adaptation, even going back to the synopsis or the origin of the word LOCA, which is community-led. Having some empowerment that focus on the local responders, and even really bringing it the aspect of, we need to also focus on local knowledge, not getting into a space and thinking, oh, we have the solutions, the community knows nothing, but also understanding what is the perspectives, what is the understanding, what is the knowledge that already exists within the communities that we intend to, kind of embed ourselves in, and how we now begin creating solutions already from what their perspective, from their own kind of view, but also the benefits that you mentioned. It allows us to really be able to plan well, to have solutions that are really focused on the end user, and makes it effective, makes it reliable, makes it sustainable, to have community-led solutions, which leads to sustainability, which leads to aspects of ownership. And really, again, we're focusing on that knowledge that already exists within this local community that we're serving, and using that to now amplify voices and make it shift towards change. Like, what does that change now look like, and how do we ensure that we're able to bring more people into the fold? Thank you so much for that. That was a beautiful presentation. I think I can, and thank you, Irene and Group One, for participating. Maybe we can invite Group Two.
So hi guys, we were tackling on what are the barriers for localization, and we had these as the barriers. One of them was unclear goals. It can be very difficult to define localization and who is local. Secondly, mismatched structures. Donor agencies may not have the structures and processes to support localization. Our third barrier was principal agent problems. Donors may have problems implementing localization with their contractors. Technology transfer was one of the barriers of localization. Requirement to transfer technology or intellectual property can limit localization. Subsidies was one of the barriers. Subsidies that are only available to producers who use local goods can also limit localization. One of the common barriers was divergent values. Donors having different values, which can also limit localization. Cultural differences. We have different cultures which have different values and customs. Translating content into the different languages and having the original meaning is also a challenge. Lack of commitment, lack of walking the talk, and also limited resources. Understanding the local market, what they prefer, and their behavior is also a challenge. And power imbalances. That's what we had on our side.
Thank you so much for that. And already you're beginning to see that, or I don't know if I'm the only one, but there's already a clear sense of what is the benefit vis-a-vis if we don't focus on localization, or see the benefits from that end, then we're pushing ourselves toward the barriers. I mean, for instance, Group One was talking about localization being leading to sustainability, leading to ownership, leading to community-led initiatives. The aspect of local knowledge that and now we're seeing here when we talk about the barriers to conversation, those aspects of cultural differences. If we don't understand what makes sense for different communities, then we're already predestining ourselves towards failure. If we are not able to talk about values and how values shift depending on people, where they are, how they were raised, what is their understanding of values, then it begins to again create a disposition of this is not for me, this is for other people, something of the sort. Then I love that you bring in two good ones. First we can have unclear goals. Because we might be thinking that we have the actual solution for the community, but it's not really responding to their current needs. And I love to reference an actual true story that happened. I think it was somewhere in not not sure where, but basically this organization visits this community, and they realize that women have to walk 5 kilometers to get water. And so every day the women would have to trek 5 kilometers to the river or the source of water, fetch water, and then walk back another 5 or even 7 kilometers back to their households. So what they did is they came up with a really fantastic solution. How do we bring water closer to the people? So at the city or the market center, they created this fancy, really interesting, call it like a shop, where you could go and redeem tokens for water. So like mtungi of water, which is clean, very good water for both drinking and cleaning and whatnot. And it was really affordable. But they noticed that at the end of the day, it was not really being used. As much as it was a good idea, and they thought the community would appreciate the effort, it actually wasn't going anywhere. And so they dove into a session of, okay, so where did we go wrong? And when doing some community engagement and just talking to the women and understanding why go still the 5 kilometers and we brought the water next to you, they found out that that trek was actually an opportunity for the women to have their own time. It was an opportunity for them to just sit down, talk, gossip, laugh, enjoy themselves outside the normal disposition of what is the roles and responsibilities within the household. So at the end of the day, they had a beautiful solution, but their goal was not, it did not resonate with the community. They did not understand the difference within the culture that they were intending to serve or reach out to. So those points are really marvelous, and also the aspects of power imbalances. Remember, again, we exist within a global space and a global network of organizations. As much as we say we're locally led, we're also globally connected. And so the question continues to remain, what happens in the global space that can also affect our localization efforts. I believe Group 2 also brought out just quite a number of things around what is the donor's value, what is the donor's needs, what does the donor sort of want to see with their resources. So that's already bringing in the aspect of power imbalance. The donor will be like, this is what I feel is the direction looking, but it doesn't again resonate with the community. And so how do we continue to have a good relationship between the global north and the global south, but really perfect and really keep on pushing for what is our local needs, our local pain points, in that as much as money is coming from there, we're able to just find that balance that ensures that we're reaching our communities and effectively bringing in solutions that resonate with them. So thank you so much for Group 1 and Group 2. I don't know if anyone might have any point of any question, point of clarification, need to further understand something. This is a point to ask a question. You can even just say you're good, you know, like I mentioned, sometimes not a lecturer, I want to hear people's voices. Are we okay?
Okay, may I have a question?
Yes, please.
Can the quality of resources limit localization?
You ask quality of resources.
Yeah, can the quality of resources limit localization? Like, how does the quality of resources limit localization?
Maybe just a clarification. When you say quality of resources, what are we referring to there?
See, it's all about the barriers to localization, and I feel like resource availability is one of them. And that's
Yes.
why I'm wondering if the availability and the quality of resources can limit localization. So I really needed someone to explain to me how the quality and availability of resources limits localization.
That is a very interesting question. It begs first to go back and look at when we are talking about resources, how do we define resources? And what is the measure of effective and Allah, things in my house are going mad. What is the measure of effective and efficient inputs towards resource allocation? In our kind of perspective, we're looking at aspects of financial resources. We're looking at aspects of human resource, and we're looking at aspects of material resources. Financial resources, just as it says, the money aspect. Do we have the money to actually do localization? Are we able to diversify or distribute the resources that we have within our hands to be able to reach the most marginalized of communities? And how possible is it within the entire cycle of the program to ensure that it's getting utilized effectively and efficiently? Then you look at also human resource. Do we have the people who can do this? One of the things that I realize sometimes even in the social impact sector and the development space is that we may lack the aspect of anthropology as a sort of direction towards how we approach community engagement. And so do we have the human resource or the human capital that allows us to really, again, as we were saying, understand the local knowledge that exists, to be empathetic within the communities that we are reaching out to understand their pain points. And so by understanding what resources are, then I now come to your question. Can the quality of resources limit localization? Absolutely. In that, if we're missing one of the two things or one of the three between financial, between human, and between material resources, then at one point or the other, we might not really be reaching the targets that we hope to achieve. But I believe it can be, there's always structures that you can implement to just understand and see where it is that you can play catch up. For instance, if you don't have the human capital, then does it mean now you work with the community themselves to be able to just be the advocates, have one of them or one of the community members really buy into the idea and help you to now embed yourself within the community to understand the cultural context, to understand the diversities that exist. If you're talking about financial resources, it's again about how do we strategically also distribute funding within even a project or a program we have that allows for a factor of localization to happen, so that it doesn't just read this 5,000 US dollars is going specifically to localization. No, it's localization and something else. So are we able to also strategically tell the story of how we're utilizing the funding that allows to have other conversations or other activities happening in line with us also promoting our localization efforts. So it's also being strategic about we do that resource mobilization, and resource allocation. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, then I see a question from Denebo. What is the role of government in localization? I would like to take this from a Kenyan context. And from a Kenyan context, you realize the urban areas, when you go to more the rural areas, you realize that there's such high regard and high respect that is placed upon the local administration facets that exist. So for instance, case in point, or a good example would be, there's a comedian in Kenya who has been doing this kind of community-led or community-driven kind of efforts to, support people in the communities. And he tried to do one such thing in the northern parts of Kenya, where he went to, I think it was an attempt to build a school, but he was met with hostility and backlash. And even the local administration officers were saying that if one such person wants to come into a community and build something, they have to speak to us first. Another example would be with a community-led organization which works around empowerment of women and girls, and they work in the arid areas of Kenya. And there was an organization that came in and wanted to provide sanitary towels or sanitary commodities to young girls. But the organization was quick to say, that's a good initiative and a good idea. However, that's not the actual current need. Why? Even as you provide these sanitary commodities, there's also no enough spaces where they can be, properly be disposed of. So already we are lacking in the aspect of water sanitation and hygiene. That's the first part. Before you bring the commodities, can you ensure that everything around this commodity, from the point that I'm getting it to utilization to disposing, that it's actually a sort of a holistic approach to it. And this was really also backed up by, again, the local community or the local administration, who were already providing the local the sanitary commodities to the girls, but they were still lacking in funds to actually create that system that allows for disposing of these sanitary pads safely and as it should be. And so they were quick to also say that at the end of the day, or they were quick to show that this is not the actual need at this point in time, because we see the community, we understand we're here, we're embedded. So let's look at it from a different angle. So I believe local governments are important, but also just for the aspect of legitimacy. And for the aspect of being able to show some kind of support. And also if you embed yourselves within the local government, because this is institutions that will not end. They will not wake up tomorrow and say the chief of this place or this place will no longer have a chief from now on. These are things that already have systems of sustainability that are embedded and deeply rooted. And so having strategies that engage or ensure that we're engaging with the local governments can also be our first step towards moving to looks like sustainability. Yeah. Oh, and also Denebo says that there's a need to do advocacy organization. Absolutely. Stanley, thank you for a comment. Based on another question, I also think quality of resources impacts localization by either enabling or limiting the ability of local actors to operate efficiently, and depends again on how you earlier explained in terms of which kind of resource. Yeah, so how efficient are we with how effective and efficient are we when we're presenting solutions to the community? Is it something that can be easily, do we even can show impact? And can we also amplify the solutions that we are suggesting or trying to implement? But yeah, thank you so much for that comment, Stanley. Thank you for your question, Betty and Denebo. That being said, I think this is just me trying to capture notes. There's just one last thing I'd like to mention, given that we are at the top of the hour. even as we speak about localization, it's important to also remember that we exist within a global network. And it's important to understand global context do also affect our localization efforts. And I think this was also one of the questions or one of the ideas that was brought up by group 2 when we're talking about just even the divergence of values for the donors and how that translates within us in the global south. And so it's important for us to also understand how localization is crucial for enhancing effectiveness and sustainability, but just think about what happens on the global space that affects or has implications within our own local response. For instance, we on Monday we had the inauguration of the 47th or 48th president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, and immediately he was sworn in. He, I believe, signed in like 35 executive orders, and one of them was the United States withdrawing from the World Health Organization. How does that impact us from a local perspective? Think about during his speech where he was just mentioning a couple of things. For instance, if you talk about queer rights, which is still a contentious issue, but if you just bring about queer rights, which was already beginning to gain traction within America, and him now mentioning that from now on, we're going to, America will only have, or we're thinking of America with only two genders, man and woman, or male and female. There's nothing else. So what does that mean if already the country that has been leading the efforts towards, promoting and protecting the freedom and rights of queer persons is now going back or retrogressing into saying that, no, that doesn't exist? What does that mean from a local perspective? What does that mean for funding for organizations that are working towards, the freedoms and the rights to minimize stigma, to have access to healthcare services for queer persons? What does that mean for their funding? What does that mean for their efforts that they've done in the last couple of years where there was, progression happening? And so even as we think about localization, it's important to always look at the global perspective and the global happenings. And it's important to have an understanding of what's going on from a macro scale that has impact on our micro scale. What is shifting with regards to communication? What is the trend happening with regards to how donors are viewing aspects of granting versus subsidizing costs for grants, or for even for funding of programs? How does it also shift donor, just the priorities? Are they now moving towards more civic education and less humanitarian response? Are they thinking that, for instance, Kenya being upgraded from low-income country to low/middle income country, how are donors viewing that? Is that Kenya is now almost able to sustain its own individual efforts, yet we see a lot of the social programs that happen in the country and especially in the sub-Saharan context, are heavily funded. So having an idea and an understanding of the global context is quite important, because it has its implications within how we respond, how we react, and how we also are able to continue to be strategic within what we're doing at a local perspective. How we're able to be strategic with how it is that we're handling communications and advocacy, both for our stakeholders, for our end users, and even for our donors, be it international NGOs or even local donors. It's important because it also allows us to see how do we better place ourselves and how do we communicate more effectively and efficiently, that we are priming ourselves for future. For the future, that we're able to show that we are in one way or the other responding to the current need of who might be a potential donor, because we see the perspective, we see the context that they're coming from. And this was also mentioned by Group 2, the aspect of cultural difference, and having an understanding of the different cultures that present themselves. So I just wanted to mention this, that it's important that even as we speak about localization, to again look at it from a macro lens and see what's happening on the outside and how does it affect us in our micro level, in our communities, in our countries, and in the different contexts that we exist in. Yeah. Up to there, so we've talked about, we've had a look at what the needs assessment was like and some of the different aspects that came out of it, especially around advocacy, leadership, resource mobilization, and localization. We've dove into a little bit of introduction to what movement building looks like, and just a brief of the kind of framework that we'll be using for our development of the movement building strategy within us, where we're saying that it has the movement identity, the movement journey, and the movement enablers. And we'll be able to just break this down further as we're doing our action plan development. And as we're speaking tomorrow, especially on how do we develop movements, how do we ensure that we are priming ourselves up for sustainability and longevity, how are we reaching our people, what is our advocacy and communication plan, and how are we making impacts so that we continue to not only just exist, but actually have some sort of impact within the communities that we're serving, that we are moving our communities towards a sense of ownership and a sense of belonging within this movement that we're creating. And then finally finished with this aspect of understanding localization. So the benefits and the barriers and challenges that we're facing towards that localization aspect. Up to there, I would just like to ask if there's any other questions. Will the notes be shared? Yes, indeed. I think I'll listen to the recording just to pick up, especially for this last bit for Group 1 and Group 2. Put them within the slides and then I'll share that. But up to there, do we have any questions, comments, or final reflections for the day? Let's see, we are, I think, 10 minutes past our time. Going once, going twice. Okay, super. So what does this look like for tomorrow? Again, as I've mentioned, we'll use the movement building, the framework that I presented that allows us to see our identity, our journey, and our people, to now move from vision to action, where we'll be thinking about how do we design sustainable movements, and as we're designing the movements, how do we monitor and evaluate our impact, and what's our vision? Then for the strategies for sustaining movements is where we'll really dive into aspects of advocacy and lobbying, for advocacy and lobbying and ensuring that our communication strategies are effective. And then finally finish with the leadership and resource mobilization for movement building. And we call it a day with an action plan of what are the next steps. And so that being said, I'd really just want to, first of all, thank you all for being here, but also to invite us to, tomorrow we start at 9. Today we started a bit later, so some things have had to move just to be able to ensure that we're keeping within time. We don't want us to be fatigued from looking at the laptop or looking at a screen for too long, or from hearing the same voice for too long. I'd like to invite us to just be able to join at 8:55, so that at 9 sharp we are starting. We have quite a lot to cover, but I will definitely ensure that we put it in a way that is interactive. So there will be quite a couple of group work sessions that will happen, so that we are co-creating and co-building. We learn and then we build together, and not just learn and leave it at the point of we understood and that's it, done, cheers. But we want to learn and also build together as a team. We want to learn and also leave this workshop with a tangible thing that we can utilize going forward from this. And so that being said, I want to thank you all for your time. Thank you for sacrificing to be here with myself. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, I wish you a wonderful rest of your day and see you tomorrow at 9 in the morning. Cheers.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much. Have a nice day too.
Thank you.
Thank you very,
Thank you. See you.
Bye.
have a nice. Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rashid, and welcome everyone to tomorrow's session. You'll use the same link joining.
Okay.
You're welcome.